Hello, this is Nick from JengaFX as usual, and today we are going to be going over LiquidGen. I'm going to train you on how to use it, and luckily, I've scheduled about an hour for us. Hopefully we don't go too long over that. Going to try and keep it short and concise, and going to just kind of wing it and kind of go the sim tuition approach to kind of how does liquid work, kind of why does it work, what are the things that we can expect when we do certain stuff, and then how can you utilize all of that to make this actually work in your favor. So, as Alexander said, let's get into the flow. So, just going to kind of show you my approach to doing things. Of course, I am new to LiquidGen as well because, well, it's a new product. And so I haven't had years to play with it at this point since we've just been trying to get stuff to work. And for a long time, it was actually a notepad based software where we just changed stuff in a notepad and that would fix simulations. So still kind of new to it. But overall, this is what you get whenever you first start the software. And so it's just a very basic setup here where if we kind of pause it, you can look. So we have a sphere that's emitting. We have gravity pulling the water down, and then it's going onto this torus, and it's kind of colliding and doing some cool stuff here. And so you'll notice that the first thing is it's kind of noisy, and that's for two reasons. So let's go over the simulation node. So inside the simulation node, there are a few things. Someone said show the mesh. This is the mesh. Let's see. Liquid mesh. Yeah, or triangles. Here you go. Here's the actual mesh itself with a bunch of random colors. But anyway, back on to the training. So inside the simulation node, this is kind of the core of where you're going to get your dynamics from, right? So if you're looking here, there's a couple things that you can change. So for instance, let me just disable the collider. If I go to say 0.08, what this is going to do is it's going to make essentially more detail. So the smaller you go, the smaller your voxel size, the more detail you're going to get, the more particles you're going to spawn within that same radius that you have, and so on. And so if we kind of like look here and we kind of see all these little tiny particles, what I can do is I can go to my liquid appearance and just say non-refractive. So you can see all these little particles. And then if we come up here to the simulation, we do back to 1.2, you can see that the scene just kind of got larger. And this is kind of how you can control the different sizes of whatever it is that you're trying to simulate. Now, one thing that I would generally recommend for me personally, I generally don't go below 0.05 inside of my simulations. I found that anything lower than that, it tends to just kind of hurt performance, and I don't really feel like I'm getting much more detail, and it's probably something we can improve in the future, but for now, that's kind of how I would do it. So it's like if you have a big whirlpool or something like that, you can see, since this is something that I want to be a relatively large simulation, I'm using a voxel size of 0.1 meters here, and you can see the white water and stuff like that kind of going off. But let's keep diving into the default here. And so if we go to simulation again, and so the step rate, that's something that I just wouldn't change. If you do need to export to say something like 24 frames per second, I would set this to 72 hertz and then do a frame stride in your export of 3, and then that will give you 24 frames per second. But other than that, I wouldn't really go lower than 60 hertz. If you need more accuracy in your simulations, you can increase your substeps. And so you can see that a substep of 2 has immediately increased the fidelity of the simulation, and the water's not ripping apart as much. If we say went up to 5, I don't know how much that would improve it. But you can see that the simulation is getting slower, and it looks like things just kind of coagulate a little bit better. The water is starting to sheet more and things like that. So if you really need higher fidelity, you want to run more substeps, this is something that EmberGen actually can't do right this second, as far as I know, is having these different substeps and running the sim multiple times to get more realistic results, so to speak. So you can see we have some really nice sheeting there, you know, with substeps of 5. And if we go to say something like 15, I actually haven't even gone this high before, but we'll see how much more accurate it really is. Looks like we're really starting to get some really smooth water and stuff like that. So it's looking quite awesome. And so yeah, so you can see the water just kind of ripping apart. And so if you are looking for much higher quality, you know, much better laminar flow and that kind of stuff, if you're familiar with laminar flow, this is kind of the way to do it. So more substeps. It's going to be more realistic. But for most things, I think you can get away with anything between 2 to 5. And so that's kind of the gist, you know, for our substeps here. Freeze simulation is pretty self-explanatory. It just freezes the simulation. So if you have a thing and you have a splash and then you want to do like a camera rotation around it and then unfreeze it, you know, that's kind of the way to do that. And of course you have reset simulation, and it'll allow you to reset it after a specific amount of time. So this is actually something, if we wanted to be, you know, on par with EmberGen and EmberGen, you have a time control tab. We probably want to add that to LiquidGen. But for now, if you want to automatically reset the sim, this is how you do it. For the projection iterations, this is also basically just, you know, adding to the detail. And not necessarily the detail, but I believe what it does is it helps, I guess, keep the water apart. And if we look at it, it says the software can stop early if the divergence is reached. And so I have a whole thing on SimTuition about what our projection is doing. And so between projection and divergence, they're basically what makes the fluid go off fluidity. I wish that we could have layman's terms for some of this stuff sometimes. But anyway, so that's kind of the gist behind that. You'll just see, yeah. So I don't know. I should probably read a paper before I try and talk about what projection is. Compensate compression. And so the thing that this does is it kind of keeps the fluid, how do I put it? If we go to a whirlpool, all right, so you can see how the fluid tends to stay uncompressed, right? So we're trying to make this an incompressible fluid, and I believe if we make this go down to 0, it should, usually if the water is heavy enough, it won't, there you go, it'll kind of like sink like that, and so it kind of compensates for that. But anyway, so I typically don't touch that. So I guess I'll say what I don't touch. I don't touch projection. I don't touch compression. Sometimes I will do compensate decompression in an instance like this. So say if I have blood splats and I want them to be forced to pull, or want them to force themselves together like this. You see how we've got, it's kind of like sucking all of the little particles together. And then if we don't have that, it still sucks it together, but they stay much larger tendrils. And so the only thing I found that's useful is just this compensate decompression and changing it to 100 or 50 or whatever. And that's that. And if my stream volume is very low, I can increase it here. Let me know if this is better. Sorry. The reason why I had it lowered is because there's some kind of like humming noise on my microphone. I need to get a new microphone and make it better. And so, because I think that this microphone has finally wore itself out. So let me know if the stream volume is better now. I was just trying to noise compress the thingamajig, the weird noise that's happening. Okay, so getting into some of the rest of the stuff, we'll kind of fly through the simulation node since there's a bunch of stuff that I just don't even touch. I do touch the PIC ratio quite a bit. And so if we look here, basically the way to think about this is noise in your simulation. That's the way that I think about it. And so the lower it is, it's more like an artificial viscosity. And so, and then whenever it's higher, it's just more of a noise, so a much less viscous fluid. We don't actually have viscosity yet, so that's why I call it artificial. And so, but you can see if you lower this and say if we, you know, increase the stickiness or something like that, it's going to look like a goo. And then if we kind of increase it, it still kind of like looks like water, right? So there's kind of a thing, and I see somebody said, well, you show how to make lava. yeah, so for instance, if I just kind of grab this like so, I would probably bring my stickiness up to like 80%, maybe bring my pick flip to maybe like 25%, and yeah, that's pretty neat. And maybe do like 2 substeps or something like that. That's starting to look like lava to me. And if you want to make it actual appear like lava, you could do something with your albedo here. And we have like an emission color, but I haven't gotten it to work. I think it probably only works with the path tracer. And so yeah, so this right here is kind of like your lava, so to speak. We still have some surface imperfections and stuff with our meshing that we need to fix. And if you have issues like that, you can kind of change like the ISO value, the SDF smoothing, and you'll see that that'll smooth that surface out here in the mesh. And so kind of going back again to our simulation, with lava, you know, you probably definitely want, you know, some higher surface tension depending on what you're looking for. So for now, like this right here, it is the real value for like a water density and the actual water surface tension. But the thing is like we're not simulating at the right scales right this second for these values. And so by default, you know, you're not going to get surface tension that actually feels like it. And especially because we're missing, you know, true viscosity and things like that. You know, you really have to overcompensate for surface tension. So what I like to do is I generally work at a density of 0.1. And then if we come in here, I would do something, say like 25,000 to start. And now you can see that the edge of this liquid has really kind of pulled up on itself, and the liquid's getting a bit smoother. So if we bring this back down to 0, you can see the liquid is kind of, having a bumpy surface again. And then we bring this up, and those particles are all starting to attract to each other. And you say, okay, well, why are my particles dying here? You know, why doesn't my liquid go farther? That's because inside of our emitter here, we have a lifetime range. So if you don't want a lifetime, this liquid is just going to keep expanding and expanding and expanding. But what we do is, just for the sake of performance and stuff like that, you can kill the particles, or if you, want to export a flipbook or something like that of a splat that eventually, kind of dies or whatever, that's a good way to do it. And you'll notice that it says the maximum amount of particles has been reached. If you want to increase your particle amount, if you run into this issue, you see it says increase the limit in the simulation node. So you can go over here to resources, and you can say, hey, I want, say 10. And Apollo says, can you please repeat what we have instead of viscosity? Yeah, so there's really 2 ways to kind of do viscosity. So one is this pick flip. So basically more noisy is more, water-like, so to speak. And so this ratio, and then basically 0 is essentially an artificial viscosity. And so that's kind of the way to do it. But one thing that I also do, where you say, hey, well, I want a variable viscosity. And so that's also something that, we don't have an official feature for. But what you can do is you could come here, create a force drag. And then let's say that we wanted just this base plane to be more viscous. So we could come here, create a box. Let's do like 50 by 50. And then we'll kind of increase this. And we'll put this over here. And then let's increase the strength to maybe like 0.5. And so now, where this liquid is pouring into this box, now that viscosity is suddenly going to change because we're applying a drag force to it. And in some ways, that's kind of what viscosity is. It's kind of a drag on the liquid. This is not a true viscosity. You can see that it causes some issues because we have such a high velocity, coming through. And, we could probably come up here and increase our box size and that kind of thing, and that might fix it. So if you want to kind of like pour, some syrup or something like that, this is probably the way you want to do it. But it is a very uniform thing, and it's not super recommended. But you can kind of like change the power and the strength and, fall offs and stuff like that, and, play around with it and see if you can get something that you want. So really quite cool. Next thing is, I think going into surface tension again is, you could go up to say something like maybe 90,000 if you really want the liquid to pull together. And so for instance, if I come over here and I bring this sphere up like so, and what I want is I just want a splat on the ground. And so I'll kind of show you how you can use surface tension for something cool. So if we go up here, let me go to my emitter. We have a couple of different emission modes for LiquidGen. And so for instance, here inside of the volume, we have two modes. So we have surface. So you can either emit on just the surface of your shape or your imported, mesh or whatever it happens to be, or you can emit inside the entire volume. I typically use volume. There's not very many cases that I want to do surface, but if I want less particles or something like that, it's something that I'll do. And then we have two different modes. We have a continuous generation with a volume flow rate, and you can see that we were adding just a crap ton of particles, and I already reached my limit here. So this scales tremendously quick. So just be careful whenever you're changing the volume flow rate, and it's really trying to create new particles while they're already inside. And so you can just have huge lumps of particles, which is probably not what you want. But, I generally work, with a flow rate of anywhere between 1 to like 3. And so Alan, hey Alan, how's it going? He says, are there plans to integrate both EmberGen and LiquidGen together for waterfalls and other things? Not quite yet. But I think that one thing that we want to be able to do is we would like to be able to say export, Alembic files from LiquidGen with an internal bridge. So, maybe you have LiquidGen on one screen, EmberGen on the other, and they could talk to each other. I don't know if we would ever have them, be inside of each other, since they're just two completely different things, and we like to keep our code clean. But other than that, let's see. So going back to this, if we wanted to make a splash and kind of really show off this surface tension, we can come over here, and I'm just going to do fill. And so what fill does is you can have a just once mode, and there are different use cases between fill. And so basically fill, as it says, it creates a new liquid to fill the gaps within the emitter, usually gaps left behind previously emitted liquids. And then continuous generation will create a new liquid at the user-defined rate no matter what. And so basically continuous generation will force particles to spawn on top of each other, whereas fill will, basically not do that. So fill is a bit more realistic, or say if you have a water hose and you're filling up a pool or something like that, it's not gonna push another particle into the scene until there is actually space for it and things are out of the way. So that's kind of the way to see that. But the cool thing about fill is you can do a just once splash, and now you kind of have this little splatter. And so what the thing is we have a really high stickiness here. So let's kind of like lower this, and boom, you can see this thing just splatting, and you can see how high our surface tension is. And why don't we do a cooler thing here? Let's do like our albedo. We'll come in, we'll do blue, maybe like a light blue or something. And then we can change, say, like our absorption strength to give us some more color. And let's actually go into our skybox real quick and load in an HDRI of some sort. It looks good. Look at that. It's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And we'll kind of maximize this. So there you go. Like, that's kind of how you make a simple splash, right? That was probably 5 parameters max. And so really, really cool to just kind of come in and see this stuff. And if you're like, hey, this pool's back together too far or whatever, well, then this is whenever you want to come in and kind of work on your stickiness. So, we could go up to say 50 again or whatever. And now it's kind of like a splat. Maybe that's too high for me. So we'll do like 30, and pretty cool, right? Or we could lower our surface tension, maybe do say 46,000. And boom, that's going to allow us to kind of splat that liquid a little bit better. And if you want those gaps, then you probably want to lower that stickiness. And then that's going to create these cool little patterns and water droplets and stuff like that. And so this is probably a good example. If we go in and we say, okay, 0.6 for my liquid, we might actually hit the particle limit. We'll see. And so you can see, how much more detailed this is, how much more particles this right here actually spawns. And so it's just a bunch of stuff. And in this case, I would probably lower my pick flip ratio to not get so many stray particles spawning. And so we can kind of see that just splatters. Might want to increase our actual surface tension. And so, yeah, really a whole different scale whenever you come in and add more particles and that sort of stuff. So just got to come in and play with it and reset your sim and kind of see, what each thing does. So really, really quite cool. And this is with us running 2 substeps, so it's even faster if we turn off our other substep. And so you can see there's a big difference between, say, 2 substeps and just 1 substep. And so with 2, we kind of get this, it's probably actually a more realistic pattern. Looks like we have a rendering error there. But so you have this more realistic pattern and whatnot. But if you come in, you're going to get something that doesn't, cohese as well, and it just kind of gets sucked up and all this stuff. So, trying different substeps can get you different looks as well to kind of figure things out. And so, yeah, so basically moving on to the resources tab, number of voxels, I generally don't mess with this. This is essentially what is going to determine your VRAM usage. I don't have a kind of a counter as to what is going to use up more VRAM or whatever. But as far as I know, we kind of pre-allocate memory here. So you can go ahead and set up your maximum resources, and I believe it'll tell you if you're out of memory or not, or the software will just be really slow. And it'll tell you your VRAM usage. And so this right here, it says 7 gigabytes, but that's just because I've allocated more stuff. And I'm going to test my theory here. I could be wrong. Yeah, so see, I just allocated 20 million particles, and now it's 8.35 gigabytes of VRAM in use, but the actual speed of the sim is still the same, right? So we're not having any issues with that. So this is purely how much we're allocating on your GPU. And so I saw somebody ask, how do I know, how far I can go? Well, you can come here and allocate stuff, and as long as you're within your VRAM, it should be running pretty quickly for you. So yeah, that's a good way to kind of figure it out. And I'll just go back down to 5 million particles or whatever. So, okay. Now next, something else. So with our resources, yeah, I don't really touch voxels. Typically, you're going to run out of voxels if you have a really high flip rate or PIC ratio, and your simulation is just kind of exploding everywhere like this. And so if you have this big explosion, it looks like, how many voxels are we using? We used to tell... Okay, so we're using 32 million voxels here, and now it's kind of lowering. And you can see we go from, say, 450,000 voxels in this frame to 32 million. And so you could see that if we went up just a little bit higher in this, we're going to run out of voxels pretty quick. And the reason that is because the simulator is sparse. There's, I would say, effectively no bounds. There actually are bounds if you go out here. And that's just because we're pre-allocating how many voxels you have, and that's going to kind of determine what your bounding box is, right? So going back to resources, number of triangles. If you ever run out of triangles, it's probably because you have a lot of actual surface area. You can see here, this is using up 1.5 million triangles. So we're pretty well within, our range of 5 million, and we don't really need to increase that. And then, of course, the meshing. And so this is what will actually export with your Alembic. And so you can come in here and kind of, smooth your mesh if you want. You can kind of change the ISO value. You can say whether or not you want meshing at all. And we also have SDF smoothing. I typically don't use the SDF smoothing. I haven't really found a use case for it. And it tends to make the liquid look worse. But there may be, some instances that you might need it, maybe with colliders or something. I'm not entirely sure. And then, of course, liquid appearance, pretty self-explanatory. You can just kind of come in and play with things and see what it does. But basically, your absorption strength is going to say, how much light is being absorbed, and thus going to show me my liquid's color. And then the index of refraction is just that it's how much is light going to bend inside of my simulator. And then roughness, you've got basically how smooth like glass it is. So this is like a PBR setting. Then you also have metalness. So if you want to simulate, say, something like liquid gold, or in this case, like liquid mercury or something like that, and you just want to preview that before you export this, to your final software of choice and put materials on there, you can at least preview it, see how it's going to look. And then there's that. And then with emission, I haven't played with this. I typically don't use the path tracer very much, but this is a good way to do that. And if you want to, say, save your liquid appearance, you can always come in here to and make a node, and you can say share appearances with things and whatnot. I do wish that we could have it automatically copy or something like that from the main node if you've put the time in to making a material, but that's something that we will probably fix later. So next thing, let's actually talk about doing simulations now. Since what I went over is these controls here are probably the biggest ones. So let's say voxel size, keeping it around 0.1. I don't use compensate compression. Sometimes I use decompression to kind of suck the liquid together artificially like this. And so you can see the liquid gets sucked together really hard. And then if I have no decompression, it's not going to suck together as much. And then we have stickiness, which is how sticky is the actual fluid on a surface. We have our density, which personally, I generally just use either 0.1 or 0.01, depending on my voxel size. The lower my voxel size, the lower my density. And by default, it's like 997. So yeah, I literally do, say something like 0.05. And then you want to go into, a really high range of surface tension, anywhere between, say, 5,000, up to 90,000 or whatever. And you just kind of tweak it until you get a liquid that looks like what you want. From there, let's actually make something. So why don't we make a, something like a simple waterfall or something like that. So what I would do is let's just go to a new project. I'll start fresh. Let's come in here and, what I'll do is let's just kind of create a box for us to come off of. So we'll just kind of change the size. I'll do, say, 50 by 50. I will come up here, bring my shape, and in general, you would probably want to do this with a mesh, so maybe you have a terrain or something like that. Your mesh, if you do import it, it would have to be a closed mesh, otherwise it won't work. So we'll just kind of come here. I'm just kind of making a little walled area, something like this. And then I'm going to just kind of tilt this at an angle. And let's kind of come to my skybox. I'm going to bring in a HDRI so I can actually see what's happening. We'll kind of replay this. And now we kind of have a waterfall effect. It was literally that simple, but we can tweak it a bit more if we want. We can add some white water and things like that. And so, for instance, I might want to come in here, maybe we would actually use, say, a cylinder emitter with not much height, but we'll have a pretty large radius. We could rotate this a little bit as well if we want to kind of match that angle. And then we could just kind of come over here. Let's see, bring this down, make it not drop as much. And there we go. So now we kind of have this waterfall. And like, let's say that, for performance reasons, I do want the particles to die, but I want them to last a little bit longer. We come to our emitter. Let's maybe say anywhere between 5 to 8 seconds is what I want for this. And so now we have this really cool stream of water coming down. Looks great. And, maybe say in our scene, maybe our camera's up here or whatever. So we're not really seeing much on the floor. If you want, you could add a drain. So by the way, if you ever need to kill particles in a particular area, we can just kind of come over here. Let's do like maybe say a radius of 15. We'll drag this over. And so basically any particles that fall within this sphere, they would automatically be killed. And so for instance, we might want to say kind of bring this down, something like this. Kind of catch all those additional particles if that's kind of out of the range of cameras. And, it looks like we maybe need to, bring it up a little bit, something like that. And so let's say that our camera's here, we can't see that cut off or whatever. So you can just kind of play with it. And so then let's say that we wanted to, first off, kind of smooth this surface a little bit. So I'll go to my mesh. I'm going to increase my SDF smoothing. And then we also learned that substeps kind of gives us some much better results on our fluid smoothing. And so you can see that. And then one thing I am curious about, so you can kind of see that whenever you have like a sloped surface like this, you have these issues because we actually voxelize the surface and the particles are kind of bouncing down on it. So, one potential solution is just having a more liquid coming down it, or, maybe blurring it in post or something like that. Or having like a thicker liquid or whatever. But Hopefully in the future we can have some things that we can improve those stepping shapes when we have just a few particles. We could try, say, maybe like 2.5 as our flow rate, spawn a bunch more particles. It kind of fixes it, but it's still problematic. But you can see we're really starting to have quite the waterfall here. And of course, inside of our simulation, even with something like water, I tend to find that I want a stickiness of maybe even 2%, if that's something that I need. And so what that does is it just makes the liquid catch just a little bit on the surface. And you can also see that actually kind of removes some of the stepping because it slows the liquid down and keeps it kind of bundled. We could do maybe 5%. And for me, that just feels like it kind of mimics, surface tension or something like that, water catching on like little grooves and stuff inside of a surface. And so now we have a much smoother liquid kind of coming off of this thing. So now whitewater. I don't have a whole lot to say about whitewater. You probably know just about as much as I do about it since it's a brand new feature that we just added. However, I can tell you some pretty good tips. So you need 3 different nodes for whitewater to work. So first off, you need an actual whitewater node here. And I just saw somebody say, will GeoGen become more optimized in the future? We actually did a bunch of optimization passes on GeoGen for this latest thing. But yeah, it'll continually become more optimized for sure. So anyway, so basically we have this right here. We've got our whitewater. And so what you need is you need 3 things. You need a whitewater node. You need a whitewater emitter because we're treating it just like a normal particle emitter. Then of course you need a shape that it is going to emit from. And so for instance, let's say that I really only wanted to emit whitewater in this area right here. What I could do is let's take, say, my base shape that I have, and I will increase the kind of the range of it, and I'm going to plug this in. And so now you can see that my whitewater is spawning here, and we won't have any whitewater spawn down here if you kind of look at that. So we have whitewater spawning, and if you want to view kind of the emitter of where it is, so of course, like our shape, just because we have our shape here, that doesn't mean that's the emitter of the whitewater. The water itself, the surface, the interior, and different things, the wave crest, those are the actual emitters for it, and that's kind of where we spawn it. So you can see here, this is kind of our trapped air visualizer. And so trapped air spawns a particular type of foam because we have 3 different things, I believe. We have spray, we have foam, and we have bubbles, right? And so bubbles are under the surface. I believe that's what the trapped air is kind of going to create. Then you have your foam that's actually on the surface from all of the different, say, wave crests and things like that. And then we have spray. And I believe that's probably when, say, the liquid becomes airborne. If there's air underneath it, it'll tend to form spray and things like that. If you come in and say splash this or whatever. You can see that the sim has slowed down quite a bit by using whitewater. Hopefully that's something that we can improve in the future. And you can also see that, there's not a whole lot of turbulence inside the whitewater. I hope that there are things that we can do in the future, to kind of, change the forces and change, how these bubbles and stuff react to the current. But I don't quite know how to do that just yet. And so, like I said, I haven't gone through all of these things, and I don't want to bore you with me fumbling around with whitewater. But kind of the basic thing that I do know is that changing the emission rate is a good way to get more whitewater. And so, like I said, I haven't played around with this much. If you do find that you're, say, running out of particles, I believe we have a whitewater particle counter here, 4 million. If you go into whitewater here, you can change the amount of resources that you want to allocate to it. And so quite neat. And we can see that, say, if I brought up my emitter, we're probably going to see quite a lot more whitewater as this, liquid is splashing around and stuff like that. And so you can see it kind of generating it. And so I do really want us to kind of focus on having more turbulence and things like that. If you want to preview just your whitewater and kind of figure out how it's going, you can go to view and actually hide your mesh, and this will show you that. And so, but I think that, we should probably have some things, similar to EmberGen, where we kind of choose like a range between how much the particles are following the sim and how much they're kind of doing their own thing or whatever. And then you can see that we have different rendering types. So there's bubbles underneath the surface here. You can't really see that, but I think we have a patch coming up with LiquiGen where you can actually be able to see the whitewater bubbles underneath the surface. But if you export this to something like Blender and render it, it should look pretty good. And so, turning off the mesh for now is probably a pretty good way to kind of set up your whitewater. And like I said, there's a ton of settings, but I just haven't gone through them yet to really figure them all out since we were trying to get the film done and things like that. But you can come in, these are the two nodes, and if you can't see anything, it's because you need to have a shape. And so, like I said, if you come over here to your sphere, right now, whitewater is only going to spawn over here where that sphere is. And so, for instance, if you have, say, something like rocks and so on, and you want, whitewater to only spawn at the rocks or whatever, or you want different whitewater passes, that's kind of the way to do it. And then if you want to export it, you come up here to Particles, Export Particles, and you can include spray, foam, bubbles, and so on, and export this to something like Blender. So that pretty much covers whitewater. And I think that's a pretty simple waterfall. You can see that the liquid simulation itself does quite a bit of work for you. That's kind of the whole point of LiquiGen, is that everything just, does a whole bunch of work for you. And, we probably would want to change the surface tension here. So let me come over here. I'll do something like 5,000. And you can really see that this is kind of pulling that water together. And, maybe we'll try, say, 50,000 to see what happens. Or sorry, 50,000 to see what happens. So you can see it's kind of pulling that water together. And so really interesting. It allows you to change a lot of different things about how your simulation is working. So that's really simple waterfall. Let's do, say, a blood splatter or something along those lines. So if we want to do a blood splat, let's go to a new thing. What I would do is right now we're going to go over something like a turbulent force. And this is something that I would recommend that you kind of apply to all of your sims. So if you're like, hey, man, this shape, it's like, it's messing up my sim. How can I break up, this shape here? So what I would do is you come over to forces, you drag off, let's add in a force turbulence. And then I would take in, so let's go ahead and we can select all this. You can press Alt-A and that'll clean up your graph. So we just kind of come in here, we Alt-A, and what I'm going to do is just plug my shape here for force turbulence of my emitter, and this is going to apply a turbulence only to this area. And so now, if I come over here and bring this back, just make sure nothing's in my camera, we can come over here, and I would do, say, something like a pretty large scale. Maybe let's try 16 at first. You can see that's kind of breaking up the emission, and then the amplitude is going to kind of choose how that liquid right there actually emits. And so for something like blood, I probably need a lot less. So let's do maybe, say, 1 as my sphere size. And this is looking pretty neat. But we can also see that the noise is the same for every single frame. And we probably don't want that either. We want some variance. So if we come to the force turbulence, you have an animation speed. And you can actually see a noise preview. This is kind of a 2D slice of your noise. So if you change things like the gain, or you change the linearity or whatever, in general, which I think it looks like you actually have to have like a smaller amplitude to actually see some of the changes. But yeah, so that's kind of like a basic preview of your noise forces. And if you want, more noisy, you have a smaller scale, and it's going to kind of change, what your liquid is doing here. So let's kind of increase our amplitude. And so now you can kind of see when we restart this, we do have a bit of a burst. But for, say, something like blood splatter, we might not want gravity. And so, by the way, if you're like, hey, this feels cool, but, my liquid feels a little bit floaty, sometimes you might want to, multiply your gravity by, some multiplier. So let's say, times 3, and then that's going to give you, say, faster falling water or whatever it happens to be. It's not going to come out of this big torus as much. It's just going to kind of slosh around in this torus or whatever. But let's go ahead and fix that. So I think before we continue on our sim, let's kind of get our shader right, just so that we can really feel what's going to be happening here. So I would, probably come here, make this pretty red, And then, you know, I would change something maybe like add a little bit of metalness. I just find that kind of looks decent in our renderer. And we can kind of change the roughness a little bit until we see some stuff. And this is probably a decent enough thing. I'm going to go to my simulation. Maybe let's do like 0.08 to get us some pretty good detail inside of this blood splatter. And for instance here, I'm just going to turn off my actual gravity entirely. And so now we kind of have this huge thing that's just kind of splatting around. And so let's say that you wanted to make a flipbook for a game, you know, or even a film or something like that. You might want to spawn this on a sprite, even in Blender, and then you would have, you know, your own gravity inside of Blender pulling this down, or you would have this right here as like a mesh. You export it as is, and then you know, you could like, you know, have gravity on your actual Alembic or something. Kind of depends on what you want to do. But so far, this is pretty cool. So let's go in, let's do 0.01 density, and I'm going to do, you know, say 55,000 on my surface tension. And now we have something really goopy. Of course, we can come down here if we want it less, you know, noisy. You can lower that pick flip, but I'm going to keep it at, say, 95. I think that's pretty cool. Surface tension is probably too high, so I'll do, say, maybe 25,000, because I still want some of that sheeting. And then we'll come in here, maybe do 2 substeps and see how that helps keep all this together. That's pretty neat, but I think we probably need, you know, say maybe something like a 25 on our amplitude. I want this to be pretty crazy, and we should probably kill our particles sooner. So I'm going to do maybe like 1.5 to 2 seconds. And then from there, let's just do a fill and a just once. And so boom, there's kind of our initial sim. And so now we can kind of go in and edit this if we want. So we can say, you know, change the scale, see how that applies. And if you want, say, a different noise entirely, you can kind of come here and kind of change these seeds. Inside of EmberGen, we actually have a dice button, and you can see it's here, but it's not hooked up. But that would change, say, all seeds for you. And so this is kind of a pretty neat little blood splatter or whatever. So kind of cool. And so let's say that, you know, maybe we do want to continue to increase that surface tension. Maybe we kind of lower our pick flip to reduce some of those individual particles. And of course, we can increase our radius if we want, have something more gory or whatever. And so this is kind of a neat way to kind of do different things. So I'm just kind of fiddling and whatnot here real quick. One other thing you can do is you can also have a another turbulence that's global, and that'll help kind of break up your particles. So if you feel like, you know, hey, you know, my particles, you know, I want a bit more motion on them or things like that, you can just bring in a global turbulence without a mask shape, and we can kind of increase this scale or whatever. And we could probably come down and bring our amplitude down to something like 0.4. And that's just going to give us a lot more variation. You know, as this stuff is moving, it kind of fakes, you know, things pulling in different directions. And of course, if we reset our gravity, you know, we have a blood splatter, something like this. And if you say, okay, well, Nick, you know, turbulence is cool and all, but I actually want this to be directional, like it's a bullet impact. Okay, well, we come here to our emitter. We have a velocity tab. Let's set, you know, say something like probably a little bit more than 5. Let's do 10. And then we can just set a fixed direction. And let's just say let's say we do want it in Y or something. We'll do like 5 or whatever as our direction. And so now we kind of have this. But the problem is well, now, you know, our force is kind of being overridden. And so you just kind of have to come in here and play with these forces or increase your turbulence. So maybe we need something like 75 if we have this. And so now it's kind of directional. And of course you can have, say, a smaller shape and things like that. Or you could use a line force to really push this instead of the emitter. So there's a bunch of different things that you can do to make this happen. And if you wanted, say, things to just splat on the ground, we can remove this lifetime entirely. And let's add stickiness so that they don't move. Let's do something like that. Blood is pretty sticky. And so maybe not that sticky. And so now you kind of have this splatter on the ground. And it's looking pretty neat. Somebody said, is it possible to make a water tornado? Yes. And so I think that this right here is kind of the basics of splatters. From here, you should be able to make pretty much anything you want. And if you like, say, some of the ones that I ended up making here, this is a pretty good thing to just hop into. And for some reason, our skyboxes are broken. So if you have any presets that are dark, you can just go in and load a skybox, and it'll make it look better. You can kind of see these are some neat things, and it's all based on what your turbulence scale is, and you can increase the octaves if you want to have more chaotic stuff, and basically smaller noise for each of the particles to have on their own. And different things like that. Somebody says, is it possible to import a force field custom built with vector agent into LiquiGen like EmberGen? No, not at this time, I don't believe. Yeah, it's not. So okay, why don't we do a water tornado? So we'll go ahead, project. I'm gonna make this right here zeroed out. Let's kind of bring it up. Let's remove this collider. We will do forces, force line. Let's do a twist strength, and then we'll do a negative repel so that we suck it towards the line. And do I need to go bigger? I do. Okay, so probably too much twist. Let's do like a twist strength of 2. And let's lower our repel strength, and then let's create a push so that we're pushing it on that line. Something like that. Let's bring in a skybox because that always looks better. This is fine. So something like this. Let's remove our ground. And so we got something like that, but maybe we want, so like I said, if you want to break up your shapes, let's bring in a force turbulence. We will mask that from our emitter. We'll change the scale. Try like 50. That's probably too much. Let's do 25. That's pretty cool. It's starting to break up the shape. We could also have no mask. Way too much. So let's do something like this. It's a bit more chaotic. You can have a bias on it so that, say, the noise mostly points up. Something like this. And then we could go into our simulation. We really need some surface tension to help with this. Let's say something like that. We'll do maybe 25,000. Starting to look more watery, but also smaller scale. You can lower your flip ratio maybe to something like 80 if you want less particles. And then I guess we could you could increase your twist strength to make it go kind of wider, fly out more, increase that push. Starting to look pretty neat. Our turbulence is a bit too strong, I think. So we'll go even lower. It's kind of neat though. So there you go. You can do a number of different things to kind of get this going. You can see your turbulence has some pretty intense effect on what's actually going to happen. So you just kind of play around. And there you go. There's kind of a water tornado, so to speak. And we could maybe make it say 8 or whatever as our lifetime. Have that thing break up a lot later. And really cool. And so somebody said, any controls over the clumping or stringiness of the whitewater? Not at this time, but I hope that we can add stuff like that. Maybe have whitewater have its own surface tension. That would be kind of cool. So yeah, really, really quite neat. That's how you would do a tornado. I think that turned out really cool. And you can see that I actually had a similar preset. It's this hypnotizing Galaxy. So it's just kind of a spinning line force that I'm kind of oscillating around to give us some variation. We've got the lifetime on the particles, and it's looking pretty neat. So let's say that we wanted to, make, I don't know if you guys have seen the game Splatoon. I haven't played it, but let's say that we wanted to make something really goopy or whatever. So what we can do, let's say I want a container of goo that I can, dip something in, and, say you have like the donut tutorial from Blender or something. So let's say that I want to, why don't we do a donut? So we'll just take this torus here. I'm going to do this, bring it up as an emitter as well. So now we have an emitter. I'm going to bring the shape up like so, but I will change my minor radius so that we just have enough that kind of covers this. The goo on the donuts in, I believe, Andrew's tutorials are typically like pink. So we're kind of doing the LiquidGen donut here. Let's go ahead into our stickiness. I'm going to do like 85%. And then our density point, let's do like 0.05, and we'll do like 55,000 on this, I do think. I need even more, and let's go to this. We'll just do fill, because we just want to do a single splat. Something like that. And let's kind of bring our shape up so that it drips off. Something like this. There we go. And let's make sure that we have no lifetime. We just want it to last forever. This is looking kind of decent so far. There we go. Surface tension's really strong. You can see it's kind of really pulling itself together. So one thing we could do is we could lower that surface tension, maybe increase our stickiness, and let's kind of fix our shading a little bit too. Let's add some metalness to it, and maybe a little bit of roughness, something like so. That's a bit more goopy, I do believe. And because we like goo, you probably want to bring this down for maximum artificial viscosity. And there you go. So that's the pick flip. You can really see the difference. Maxed out like it kind of typically is, really, really noisy. Bring this down and it's similar to artificial viscosity. So there you go. And then you probably want to pause it right about there. And what you could do is you could have a drain down here to kind of kill those additional particles if you wanted to export this out. So we'll come here. Let's do a cylinder. We'll do, say, 25. And we'll just kind of come up, bring that up right about there. And now any particles that flow below that, they would get killed or whatever. And eventually particles would stop dripping off and whatnot. But pretty neat. So that's kind of how you would do that. And of course, you know, you have these, it looked like you have a very uniform, you know, split up of this liquid. So if you wanted, you know, you could have something like, once again, bring in our handy dandy force turbulence, kind of mask that. And then we have something maybe like this. And then that's going to give you a less uniform shape on your splatter or whatever. So, I mean, this is stuff that, I mean, you would typically be waiting hours for this kind of crap. And yeah, here it is. It's great. And so Dark Side said, any chance of on a density pass or erosion pass? Yeah, absolutely. We want to be able to have it so that you can have, you know, easily erodible fluids and stuff like that for things like Flipbooks and so on. So all that stuff is definitely coming. LiquidGen is most certainly oriented towards stuff like Flipbooks and things like that. In the meantime, if you don't want to erode, that's kind of what the point of our emitter lifetime is here. And so, like, if I go to, we actually have a game ready setup. And so if we go here to this liquid splat, I've kind of got a 8x4 flipbook that's ready. We just set a directory and then export. And that's bizarre. Why won't it let me preview? Let me change this. Maybe just add a 2. Maybe there's something stuck. Oh, okay. There's a bug. It won't show me my export if there's any devs looking at this. Yeah, so you're supposed to be able to see your export here, but it's not working for me for some reason. Let me change to a different drive or something. See if that fixes it. Yeah, so for whatever reason on my main drive it wouldn't show it. But yeah, so there you go. So there's like a playable flipbook, and of course you could also take something like your alpha and erode that if you want as well. So quite interesting. Yeah, the main directory we do install it to program files, so that might be the issue. Somebody said, can you move a collider with water force? Not at this time. We don't have any sort of buoyancy simulations or things like that, but that's something that you know, I think we could do. Somebody said, Mark says, I see that the current VRAM usage is 8.29 gigabytes. Can I use it with only 8 GB of VRAM? Yes. If you really need to, you can go into the Resources tab, and I would probably lower this, maybe say to like 48 million voxels, maybe 4 million particles, and that would allow you to kind of control your memory usage. So if I say go to 4 million, that's not enough. Let's do like, say, 50 million voxels instead. And yes, that's going to give me 7.13 gigabytes of VRAM that I have allocated. So if you need to lower your VRAM and LiquidGen is being slow and stuff like that, you can come to your Resources tab in Sim, and that will fix it. Can we have custom velocity import from an ABC source? Plugging it into like the Forces tab, no. But if you made it a collider, yes. But that's stuff that we should definitely look into. And Darkzide also said, can you make tileable water streams? Not at this moment, but that's something that I would hope that we have to. We actually need to add that to EmberGen as well. So yeah, let's see. Thinking about more stuff, let me see if there's any examples that I would like to break down. Of course, let's say like this macaroni and cheese. So let me just kind of delete my emitter so I can kind of show you the gist of how this would work. I'll reset everything here. So yeah, so basically, if you come here, you know, say you import it, so you just create an import node, import your mesh and that kind of thing. And so now here's my mesh. What I can do is come here, add an emitter, we'll add a shape, and let's say that we want to emit some cheese. If we go ahead and play this, by default, that emitter isn't going to be constant, so we can change this to continuous generation, or we could also do the fill option and uncheck just once because there's 2 different fill modes. And so now, right now, we're kind of filling up this macaroni bowl or whatever. You can see that it's not going to push the macaroni around or anything like that. But we can make this a bit more cheesy. So if we go to simulation, you know, I would probably lower this pick flip probably to something like, you know, 15%. I would probably increase my stickiness to like 85%, really get it to stick on all this macaroni. But you can see that LiquidGen is actually, what do you call it, accurate enough to fill up all these little macaroni noodles, so to speak. So if we went in here to my collider and we uncheck show, you can see it's actually filling up all these little noodle holes and things like that. So really quite cool to kind of see the inner workings of, you know, just how good our collision system is. There's still a lot of problems, especially if your colliders move, you know. So for instance, if I come in here and I move this, it's actually not exploding, but it is going through the wall there. And so you can see that there are some issues. And if you have that issue, you can change your relative resolution. Let's see if that fixes my coming out of the wall issue. Not quite. Let's do 200. So if you have issues like this, this is kind of your thing. But yeah, so we're still not very good with moving colliders. That's still a limitation, but it is alpha. Somebody said, if I want to break a dam with a rocket, can I bring the fractured mess into LiquidGen? Yes, you can. And so, for instance, why don't we do, so this is kind of the end of macaroni and cheese. I'd probably bring this in and kind of increase our surface tension as usual. So yeah, really cool. Quite neat to kind of come in and play with this. There's some cheesy cheese. So really simple. You can see that, you know, there's not very many parameters in LiquidGen. It's ultimately really easy to use. It's just all about, you know, you want to think about what is my emission shape? You know, how am I emitting? Do I want any forces coming from my emitter? And if you want forces coming from your emitter, you generally want to use like force turbulence and mask it with that same shape. And then come in here and say, you know, kind of change that. You generally want an animation speed so that you have randomness. We can kind of change our scale. You can add octaves if you want. Kind of lower that a bit. We can increase this amplitude. And so you're going to get all kinds of, you know, neat stuff. And so kind of cool. Any chance you can touch on imported collider best practices? My best practice would generally be make sure that the mesh is a closed mesh everywhere it needs to be. Like, you can't just import a plane and expect it to collide. It is not going to work. It will break our voxelizer. So the mesh has to be closed. And then, I mean, other than that, just export it like you would export anything, hopefully. And if it doesn't work, let us know. Now, one thing I would recommend is that, say for like our Golem film that we did. So if you haven't watched our short film yet, go watch that. That really shows LiquidGen in an actual production. There's so many cool LiquidGen shots, whether it's mud or lava, water, that kind of stuff. We actually had, because the mesh was so detailed, if we were simulating something on the arm, we would only bring in just the arm pieces that we needed, because the voxelizer, the more voxels you're taking up with your mesh, the less performant the software is going to be. And personally, I like to work in real time, so we would just export the pieces of the golem that we needed. And thankfully, we didn't need like the entire mesh of him in the shot. But if we did, we would probably, do some sort of, what's it called, decimation on the mesh or whatever. So hopefully that answers your question, Jordan. Looking to see if there's any other questions that I might have missed. GD is back. Imagine all of this in a 3ds Max plugin. Well, look, GD, email us if you have coding experience. We have an API for EmberGen, and you can program to your heart's content to get things loading live in 3ds Max. Okay. From there, I think, why don't we... So things like this, really simple. You can go in and do it. I'm trying to think if there's any other simulation type y'all would need. Is there anything else y'all are curious of how I would make it? Oh yeah, I wanted to do a dam break. Okay, so let's do a dam break. So we've got this. We'll just start from this preset. You could do that too. Why don't we... so what I would do is I would fill up a box. So I'm just going to come here and let's make this, say, a box. And let's do like 5 by 5. I actually need something way bigger than that. Let's do 10 by 10 and by 10. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to invert the shape. And so now we basically have a bounding box. And so let's go ahead and change our position and change our rotation and maximize this. Then I'm going to bring in another box, shapes, something like this. And what I'm going to do is, let's say 11 by 11, or we can still do 10 by 10, but I'm going to change the y-axis to be something like 25, maybe 50, because this is pretty large. And let's do like 20. And then kind of bring this up, just like so. And now let's kind of take our original shape. We will place that over here. We could take this right here and plug this into our emitter instead of that. And now that's going to fill up that box. And so we could just say fill. And then now we have an immediate dam. And then it's going to be just once. And then whenever we turn off this collider, it's going to be a dam break. But we have a bunch of forced turbulence here, so let's not do that. So here, there we go, something like that. So there's a dam break. And actually, let's not have a lifetime on my particles. So something like that. And if you want to keyframe this, so let's keyframe it so I don't have to keep doing it. So just shape activity and then disabled. So if you want to keyframe, you click the little thing here. It says timeline override. You'll go to your timeline, you shift click to add keys. And we just click it and disable. And so now it's enabled and disabled. There's our dam break. And so yeah, that's pretty much it. And now just imagine that instead of that, so let's say that we didn't do that. Let's say that we actually had a wall or something that we wanted to lower. So I'll bring in, actually I'll just copy this box and I think I'm in the y-axis. So let's make this kind of small. And actually I plug that into emitter. Wrong thing. Double click to remove that. We will come over here. Let's kind of just increase this. And this right here is actually an inverted collider. So I need a new one because I don't want an inverted collider for this particular mesh. invert shape. There we go. And I think I probably want to do something like this, and let me just break it later, because the dam is actually breaking. So I actually do need to plug in this emitter shape here to contain it. And then we have our, so we've got our shape activity, and then let's see, show node details. This is the right one. And so I'm just gonna delay the breaking of that one. And so there we go. So imagine that there's that, but maybe we didn't want to keyframe that. Let's say that we want to keep it up the whole time. And so there you go. So that's kind of containing it. We've got this little dam or whatever. Let's make this maybe so like 15 so that the water can't come over. And then you kind of, you know, imagine this is like pieces falling or whatever. So you can see that you can just kind of come in, but you can also see issues with our collider. So kind of, oh, you can see some bubbles. Look at that. Look at the cavity. Amazing. Okay. So one thing that I can kind of think of as well, it's just so awesome to see the dynamics of this in real time. But one thing I can think of is, notice how whenever like I move this collider, the water kind of explodes. So if you go to, say, velocity transfer, you could maybe say like 20%. That might help it. Actually made it worse. So this is still one of the things that that we still need to fix. There's something wrong with our new solver in general, I think. And we could probably lower our pick flip by quite a bit if we really want a collider moving through it. Yeah. I don't know what's happening. I don't know why it's doing this. Issues. This is why we're alpha once again. But yeah, so that's kind of that. It looks like it does work if we're at least moving down, so that's good. You can also have a gate. You can see the liquid kind of doing its thing. Is it only happening when you move it by mouse? I don't know. Let's see. We can keyframe this. Let's say our Y is, nope, I don't want to keyframe Y. Let's keyframe this. So make that there. Just kind of do this, bring it up. Actually, I made a keyframe way out here. I didn't want to do that. Let's see. And let's, I'm going the wrong way. Nah, so yeah, so even not moving it by the mouse, it still makes it explode. But I don't know, it's pretty cool anyway to kind of see what you can do. So there's still problems with LiquidGen, but that's kind of how you set up some stuff. So I mean, overall, I mean, LiquidGen is really simple. There's not many things. You know, I kind of talked about and got all tongue twisted on what some of these things were because I just don't know. Yeah, I mean, come in here. Actually, let's try something. Let me change my substeps on this and see if that fixes it. It might. I might just not have enough substeps. Nope, still an explosion. Let me try my max iterations on projection because I know that that has to do with stability in a way. Still explodes. Yeah, so I think that there's just some kind of problem with our velocity. I know that we noticed it, and I even know that on, I think, on our whirlpool example that we have here, let me disable the whitewater so that I have more performance. So I do know that even on this right here, it occasionally will explode and like little random explosions will happen. It's not happening right now, but I do know that it happens. So, oh, I saw one. Okay, yeah, so it does happen from time to time. But I don't think it has to do with the slowness either, like not too much. It appears side to side is good, but if we, yeah, that's kind of when things start to explode. This one's fine. I think it really depends on the situation. I mean, it could have been because we had kind of a fake bounding box or whatever. Because there is this preset that's really cool, the goo grabber. See, we're all just exploring here today. Yeah, so like this goo grabber works great. And so imagine I wish I had like a walking character model or something like that that could just like walk through this and lift their legs up or come out of the stuff. Somebody who has a character coming out of like water or something, standing up, load this preset and put it in our Discord. I'm curious to see it. Really cool. So yeah, that's about it. Are there any final questions? Because I only wanted to go for about an hour, and I honestly covered pretty much almost everything that there is. I mean, LiquidGen right this second is really simple. You know, I guess for export help, it's really easy. You know, just come over here and export whatever you want. If you need to export your transform, so say if you do have a, so one other thing about colliders is, let's say you do have a shape, you take this transform and plug it in, and theoretically, if you have the same scale and the same position of your Alembic mesh or whatever inside a blender as your actual imported mesh is, you won't have any problems lining things up. Like there should be no problems lining things up because of this transform. So if you are basing things off of an imported mesh, plug in your transform, and we do all the hard calculations for you to figure out where that Alembic should be inside a blender and things like that. So really cool. And so I guess somebody said rain effect with an umbrella. And then WDK says, is there a solution for those vibrating edges like here? So not really. I mean, maybe we could increase our substeps. That might help. So it kind of helps, but kind of the problem is like our particles, they kind of have to go through. And so I think that substeps definitely helped here, but you can see some issues kind of like propagate through. I think that this is just problems with, you know, how our meshing is, and, you know, you can increase the surface area. That looks like that kind of fixes it with more substeps. So yeah, fluid's not completely stable yet, but I mean, this looks pretty good. That's pretty stable. So more substeps. And then as for a rain effect, let's do a rain effect. And then I think we'll probably call this stream done. So if I was doing rain, what I would do is, let's do like a cylinder, and I'm going to make it like 0.1 is my height. So really small. So I'm basically just getting individual particles. And then like, let's kind of change my radius. And then I could do like a 0.1 rate. I could even do like 0.05, so much less. So now we have just like a bunch of little tiny droplets. And let's go to my surface tension, 0.1, like 55,000. And so now we have like little droplets kinda. And then kind of bring this up. And then I would say that we probably want to have a much smaller voxel size. So let's do like 0.04. Might be too much. Let's do like 0.065 or something. So something like that. So now we've got this rain falling, and I don't have an umbrella mesh, so I'm just going to like kind of fake one with a maybe an ellipsoid collider. And so let's see, let's do like 10 by 10. And I guess that's relatively umbrella shaped. I don't know. Something like that. There you go. And if you want even less water, we could do like 0.01. And then I probably would add some, a little bit of stickiness, maybe like 2%, just so that it kind of slides down. You can kind of see that. Let's show a skybox, just to kind of see a better renderer of it. There you go. I mean, that's not horrible. And we could probably change our pick flip maybe to something like, I don't know, 40. Kind of have some of those raindrops not kind of coming off. I mean, I think that's pretty cool. And theoretically, yeah, all your little drops should kind of coagulate. We could really like bump it up. Let's do like 120,000. on that. And then you'll definitely have like drops that kind of pull together and stuff a lot better. And then you could also do the compensate decompression, which you'll notice that compensate decompression also has an effect of rolling things down the side of a collider, kind of like surface tension would. So that is another interesting thing. And I'd really have to read up on what the different compressions do, but I just know that compensate decompression is pretty cool. And so yeah, so definitely really quite neat. I think that's cool. And I mean, this would probably be pretty fine if you could have like motion blur or something like that. And I mean, these aren't quite rain droplets, but yeah, if you had some motion blur on this, I think it would probably look pretty decent. I mean, just depends. We can increase our rain, our shower head. And so yeah, so once you get more water kind of pooling up, you can really see that this starts looking pretty cool. So really, really excellent. But the cool thing is if you do need motion blur inside of your mesh export, you can click this export velocity. And I think that most good renderers, they will take that velocity into account, and it would create motion blur for you, since we do export the velocity of, I guess, the vertices or something like that. So how does that look for rain? Does that answer the person, John? Yeah, looks like it. All right, cool. So yeah, that's training. Was this helpful? You know, give me some yeses or nos in the chat. Maybe I could have done something better. I kind of fumbled at the beginning. I apologize for that. But I did go through mostly everything. I wish I could have gone through more whitewater, but I just don't understand the node that much yet. Like I said, it's a very new feature even for us. So yeah. And Third Dimension said, is LiquidGen out yet? Of course it is. Go to our website, jengafx.com, and you can try it. It's also /software/LiquidGen as the direct link. But yeah, so hopefully this was helpful, guys. You know, yeah, LiquidGen is simple. I mean, it's way easier than EmberGen, at least. There's not that many parameters, and I would expect that, you know, LiquidGen will get, you know, more and more advanced as time goes on. So yeah, it's really, really quite cool. And, you know, there's just a bunch of cool stuff that you can do. You can do, you know, liquid gold. You can do, you know, kind of these, you know, orange goo things, and just all kinds of cool stuff. There's so much opportunity here for LiquidGen, I think. And yeah, and Raza says, can we create underwater bubbles with LiquidGen? Yes, you can. If I go to the whirlpool and let's say, hide this mesh, and we look, you can see all the underwater bubbles here. So there you go. And so you could export all these little bubble points and put a little bubble mesh on them or whatever in your real render inside of Blender or whatever. And that will work because you can export the bubbles specifically. And so I wonder if there's a thing that I could do to see only bubbles. So there you go. So this is just the bubbles. So inside simulation, you can choose if you want spray. So we can say just our spray, which there's not a whole lot here. We can see just our foam, which is here. And we can see just our bubbles, which is here. So yeah, really, really awesome. You can kind of come in, and luckily it reduces the parameters, so you can increase the drag on the bubbles, which actually maybe that's a way for us to have their own parameters. Look at that. Okay, so increase the drag. Let me simulate foam too. Is there a foam drag? There is. Look at that. Okay, cool. This is way better. This is, so now my waterfall at the beginning of the stream actually would have been better. Look, I'm discovering new things right now, and you can learn and discover just like I am because I didn't program this. Look at that. That is so cool. That is a lot of foam. Okay, well, now we can go in and increase the emission rate. Let's go ham. Let's give myself a buffer of like 25 million particles or something like that. Okay, that is looking pretty sick. Let's see the liquid mesh. Unfortunately, the liquid mesh rendering isn't that good. Let me see the path tracer. I don't know if this is going to work. I don't think it will. Doesn't look like it is. I don't think it works with the bubbles yet. And I think we added a thing where in a patch we're coming up where we will be able to see this. But yeah, so if you want to see your full whitewater, this right here is kind of the way to do it. Really, really cool to kind of see all that. And I think there's a lot of, look at the splashes. I think there's a lot of opportunity here if somebody, you know, just takes this whirlpool preset, makes a really cool render for it. So yeah, and then you can also see the bubbles to foam rate. You know, do you want all bubbles to turn into foam? So there's kind of a lot of things that you can do to tweak this stuff. And of course, in your emitter, this kind of differentiates, you know, what is causing the emission. I don't know what spread is. It says determines how random the initial direction for the foam will be. How about that? Initial spread rate, 100%. Initial bubble spread. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not extending it for another hour, Will. But I just kind of got hooked on this. I think it's really quite cool. So yeah, you can go in, you can tweak so much stuff. And I guess the last thing I'll show about whitewater, since I do remember this part, is if we do show the liquid mesh, you can kind of see the range here. So this is how you change what the emitter is right this second. So this is like your trapped air range. We can see like our wave crests. You can see the wave crest range. And this is going to kind of, you know, pull from different emitter types and that kind of thing. And so where it's yellow and blue, that's where you're actually going to do your thing. Any ETA for the hotfix with, I guess, the EmberGen, the little emoji thing is covering up my stuff. But I guess that's EG particle exporting. I don't know, maybe within a day or two. Probably a lot of our team is actually on vacation now. They're all in London and Europe right this second, kind of taking a break. But I would expect us, the actual fix is done. We just need to get the patch out. But our person who does our builds, he is kind of away right this second. So hopefully soon. Can I download it and use it in Unity? Yes, you can, but you have to export Flipbooks. So if you wanted to export to Unity, you would just kind of come here, go to export image, set up your cameras, and then you would have a export similar to this. I think I'm going to crash. Oh no, I didn't. Cool. Yeah, so you would use Flipbook's global mobile software. Yeah. There you go. There's the download link. Go to jengafx.com and I'll show you here. If you're curious, you go to jengafx.com, click LiquidGen, click try for free, set up your, get your email, and then choose Windows or Linux and click download. And that's it. Really, really simple. Let me see. I need my stream chat back. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much it. I think that covers everything. And of course, if you want to export other stuff, other passes, you just kind of come here. You can add in, say, an alpha channel or whatever. Just click those different buttons, and we can kind of re-export. We'll see what it'll do. It'll generate our normal maps. Can you export to Niagara cache particles? I mean, you can export in Alembic and use that as a cache, but I would still highly recommend that you do this. Use a Flipbook. That's pretty much it. So yeah, you can kind of see your normal map. You can see your alpha channel, all kind of stuff. Really, really awesome for games. It's only going to get better. So excellent. Let me go to my full cam. And last thing I'll say is our film. Let's see, master of the elements. Let me get the link. Post it. Here you go. If you haven't seen our short film yet, go watch our short film. It details, it's a technical showcase for all of the Elemental Suite. So if you buy the Elemental Suite, you can get EmberGen and LiquidGen, GeoGen. And tomorrow, we should be doing a demo of some of the new EmberGen features and some of the GeoGen features. And with GeoGen, I'm probably going to just fumble my way through it as usual. But I mean, that's a cool way to learn. So if you want to watch me do that, we'll be streaming at the same time. And then that's our last stream for our elemental week. And yeah, we're in Discord. If you need any help, if you want to know how to create something or you need a preset or whatever, we're generally on staff most of the time and can help you create that stuff. And so, yeah, this is quite awesome. Was a pretty exciting stream. And yeah, I'll catch you all later. Bye for now.